Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Go Premanandi. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Shila Bhai Charnaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Goswami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Adanta Gauri Vaishnava Vrind Ki Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur Ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की मथुरा धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की सामवेद भक्त वृंद की Yugadharma Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Srila Prabhupada Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Srila Prabhupada Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone. For this morning's Bhagavatam class, we're reading from Canto 4, Chapter 2, text number 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 4, Chapter 2, Text 31. Esha eva hi lokanam Shiva pantha sanatanaha Yam purve chanu santasthur Yat pramanam janardana Esha eva hi lokanam Shiva pantha sanatanaha Yam purve chanu shantasthur Yat pramanam janardana Esha eva hi lokanam Shiva pantha sanatana Yam purve chanu shantasthur Yat pramanam janardana Word for word translation. Esha, the Vedas. Eva, certainly. He, for. Lokanam, of all people. Shivaha, auspicious. Pantha, path. Sanatanaha, eternal. Yam, which, Vedic path. Purve, in the past. Cha, and. Anusantashtahu, was rigidly followed. Yat, in which. Pramanam, the evidence. Janardanaha, Janardana. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Chana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. The Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement in human civilization, which have been rigidly followed in the past. The strong evidence of this principle is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is called Janardana, the well-wisher of all living entities. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has claimed that he is the father of all living entities, regardless of form. There are 8.4 million different species of life forms, and Lord Krishna claims that he is the father of all. Because the living entities are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are all sons of the Lord, and for their benefit, because they are hovering under the impression that they can lord it over material nature, the Vedas are given to them for their guidance. Therefore the Vedas are called Auparushaya, for they are not written by any man or demigod, including the first creature, living creature Brahma. Brahma is not the creator or author of the Vedas. He is also one of the living beings in this material world. Therefore, he does not have the power to write or speak the Vedas independently. Every living entity within this material world is subject to 4 deficiencies. He commits mistakes, he accepts one thing for another, he cheats, and he has imperfect senses. The Vedas, however, are not written by any living creature within this material world. Therefore, they are said to be Auparushaya. No one can trace out the history of the Vedas. Of course, modern human civilization has no chronological history of the world or the universe, and it cannot present actual historical facts older than 3,000 years. But no one has traced out when the Vedas were written, because they were never written by any living being within this material world. All other systems of knowledge are defective because they have been written or spoken by men or demigods who are products of this material creation. But Bhagavad Gita is Auparushaya, for it was not spoken by any human being or any demigod of this material creation. It was spoken by Lord Krishna, who is beyond the material creation. That is accepted by such stalwart scholars as Sankaracharya, not to speak of other acharyas such as Ramanujacharya and Madhavacharya. Sankaracharya has accepted that Narayan and Krishna are transcendental, and in the Bhagavad Gita also Lord Krishna has established Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate. I am the origin of everything, everything emanates from me. This material creation, including Brahma and Shiva and all the demigods, has been created by him. For everything has emanated from him. He also says that the purpose of all the Vedas is to understand him. Vedescha sarve aham meva vedyo. He is the original Vedavid or knower of the Vedas, and Vedanta Krit, or compiler of Vedanta. Brahma is not the compiler of the Vedas. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is established Tene Brahma Hridaya, the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, instructed Brahma in the Vedic knowledge through his heart. Therefore, the evidence that Vedic knowledge is free from the defects of mistakes, illusions, cheating and imperfection is that it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Janardana and has thus been followed from time immemorial, beginning from Brahma. The Vedic religion or the principles of the Vedas have been followed by the highly cultured population of India since time immemorial. No one can trace out the history of Vedic religion. Therefore, it is Sanatana, and any blasphemy against the Vedas is calculated to be atheism. The Vedas are described as Setu, which means a bridge. If one wants to attain his spiritual existence, one has to cross an ocean of nescience. The Vedas are the bridge by which to cross such a great ocean. The Vedas describe how to divide the human race into 4 divisions according to quality and working capacity. This is a very scientific system, and it is also Sanatana, for no one can trace out its history and it has no dissolution. No one can stop the system of Varna and Ashrama, or castes and divisions. For example, whether or not one accepts the name Brahmana, there is a class in society which is known as the intelligent class, and which is interested in spiritual understanding and philosophy. Similarly, there is a class of men who are interested in administration and ruling others. In the Vedic system, these martially spirited men are called Kshatriyas. Similarly, everywhere there is a class of men who are interested in economic development, business, industry, and money making. They are called Vaishyas. And there is another class who are neither intelligent nor martially spirited, nor endowed with the capacity for economic development, but who simply can serve others. They are called Shudras, or the laborer class. This system is Sanatana. It comes from time immemorial, and it will continue in the same way. There is no power in the world which can stop it. Therefore, since the Sanatana Dharma system is eternal, one can elevate himself to the highest standard of spiritual life by following the Vedic principles. It is stated that formerly the sages followed this system. Therefore, to follow the system is to follow the standard etiquette of society. But the followers of Lord Shiva who are drunkards, who are addicted to intoxicants and sex life, who do not bathe and who smoke ganja, are against all human etiquette. The conclusion is that persons who rebel against the Vedic principles are themselves the evidence that the Vedas are authoritative. Because by not following the Vedic principles, they become like animals. Such animalistic persons are themselves evidence of the supremacy of the Vedic regulations. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sarvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Shute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'll read the verse again. Canto 4, Chapter 2, Text 31. The Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement in human civilization, which have been rigidly followed in the past. The strong evidence of this principle is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is called Janardana, the well-wisher of all living entities. So, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes or references or gives or sheds light on a lot of principles. And when you read through, especially the last section of the purport here, to some extent it's common sense. Vedas describe how to divide the human race into 4 divisions according to quality and working capacity. So like that, there are in fact, if you read the Bhagavad Gita at the very beginning, Krishna starts off the 3rd chapter by saying that those who follow the Vedas follow a cycle of sacrifice. So, and in so many places in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually references that one who doesn't follow the path of the Vedas is actually committing sinful activities. So this whole concept of the Vedas, and as Prabhupada says, no one can trace out the history of the Vedas. Well, in our modern context, modern scholars, in fact, I was very fortunate if any of you have had a chance to read this book. It's a book called Searching for Vedic India by the known as Devamrita Swami. And in this book, there's a reference to who's considered to be the godfather of Indology, Max Muller. He was German, but he was recruited by the British to actually translate the Vedas, or the texts that were written in Sanskrit, for purposes of converting the Hindus to Abrahamic faiths. So, like Max Muller, when he first came in, when he first arrived to the scene, he started now dating these scriptures. So, he assigned dates. So he assigned dates, of which he assigned the date to Rig Veda being compiled as 1200 BC. Does everyone know what does BC mean? Before Christ. So, because modern history considers civilization to have started after Christ, or from the beginning of Christ, so everything prior to that is considered to be BC, before Christ. So he assigned the date 1200 BC to the Rig Veda, and then and gave about 200 years, and then the other Veda, and then finally it culminates in the appearance of Buddha, which is considered to be 600 BC. Now, Max Muller, like I said, was given a task, and his task was to somehow destroy the culture of India. And if I read, Maharaj makes a reference here. So he was recruited by the British East India Company, and actually the fact is that the payment was never made. It doesn't refer here as to how was what was the exchange between the two. So in this book, Maharaj writes, Max Muller, who was a stern fundamentalist Protestant, Muller left written tracts of his scholastic motives. He took no pains to hide his agenda, much more evangelical than colonial. In 1868, writing to the Duke of Argyll, then Secretary of State for India, Muller proclaimed, "The ancient religion of India is doomed, and if Christianity does not step in, whose fault will it be?" While publishing his many translations of Vedic texts still in use today, Muller explained his mission in 1896 in a letter to his wife. "I hope I shall finish the work, and I feel convinced, though I shall not live to see it, yet the edition of mine and the translation of the Veda will hereafter tell to a great extent on the fate of India. It is the root of their religion, and to show them what the root is, I feel sure is the only way of uprooting all that has sprung from it during the last 3,000 years. So as I was saying, Muller, dated these texts where he assigned the date of 1200 BC to the Rig Veda. Later on, but the irony the fact is that today these scholars actually shy away from his claims. They don't fully endorse it. So towards the later years of Muller's presence, however, what we almost never hear is that Muller himself later disowned his own guesswork. Near the end of his life, he candidly confessed in print whether the Vedic hymns were composed 1000, 1500 or 200 or 3000 BC, no power on earth will ever determine. So he accepted that fact. But again, like I said, he came with a motive, and that motive, however, whatever impact it had, as it is said, Vedas are aparoshaya. So it's actually coming from a superior source. It's not composed by any man, human, demigod, because the Vedas are considered to be the breathing of the Lord itself. So in that sense, because it's aparoshaya, and the reason why we struggle with it is because there are two ways of, in our day-to-day life, there are two ways of acquiring knowledge. And the most commonly or the most practiced way of acquiring knowledge is the inductive process, the aroha panta. So that is knowledge that is acquired through our senses. So for example, a lot of time people will see, I'll only believe what I see. Right? So now, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, that is not possible because we are a human, or a human being, a conditioned human being has 4 defects, which is he commits mistakes, he accepts one thing for another, he cheats, and he has imperfect senses. So we have imperfect senses. How do we know that? For example, when we see the sun outside, the sun if I were to just put my palm around it, I'll be able to see that the sun is this small. But actually the sun is much more bigger, and it's a universe it's a planet much bigger than Earth as well. And it is said that the moon is actually further than the sun. So if one has to go to the moon, one has to go past the sun. Now if you see a stick that is half submerged in water, we'll think that the stick is half broken. But the stick is submerged in water. So our senses can deceive us because our senses are imperfect. Secondly, we have the tendency to commit mistakes. Once I remember a few years ago, I think it was a Bhakti Shastri batch, and the facilitator was actually saying, prove it to me that you've never committed a mistake because you're perfect. And this was an exercise that this person was doing. And we were all saying, no, he said, no, you play the devil's advocate. You've never committed a mistake, accept the fact. So we said, then we were presenting certain points, and finally the facilitator said, have you done something twice? Yes. Why? because I didn't get it right the first time. So he said, that's how you actually prove that, you didn't get it right the first time. That means you've committed a mistake or you haven't done something perfectly. We always illusioned. So it's like that. Our senses are imperfect. So that's why the inductive process of experiencing everything through our senses can be misleading. So there's 4 ways. So like I said, there is inductive process and there's deductive process. That is knowledge acquired through authorities. Now, there is 3 ways, again, in the subcategory of acquiring knowledge. One is pratyaksha praman. That is pratyaksha praman is direct perception of the senses. So that is, which I described as seeing through, through my senses. So a lot of time we perform experiments which are instruments, but the instruments are an extension of what our senses can do. So pratyaksha praman is, everything within my direct experience is what I believe in, which is what a lot of times Vedas, because they say, as Prabhupada said, that if we historians are actually considering history to be the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Babylonians, anything beyond that, anything beyond 3000 years or 3000 BC, then gets into the field of archaeology. So when archaeology steps in, then they use whatever tools or techniques that they have to date further. And within archaeology, now there are limitations, because there was just recently, 4 days ago, there was the consecration of the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, and a lot of the facts that were presented in court were actually proven through the practice of archaeology, where they found certain remains of the temple just to prove it to the court and to authorities. And the reason why this becomes a bit of a controversial topic in today's world is because everything is considered to be on the march of progressive secularism. That means that there should be no mention of religion. So even, like you said, like I mentioned earlier, the biblical teachings, or because there was a motive to convert, to uproot the Vedic culture. Today, those same techniques are being applied to the biblical society as well, because they want to somehow preserve or just keep a veil of secularism. So, pratyaksha praman is one of the ways by which we acquire our senses, but like I said, because the senses are imperfect, it falls short. Second is anuman, which is through hypothesis. So it's an extension of the pratyaksha praman, which we understand that some things are done through senses, but then I hypothesize. For example, if the room is closed, and all of a sudden if I hear a sound, I'll probably conclude, or I'll assume that maybe there's a table there and the table has collapsed. So it may be true, may not be true, but I'm speculating. So a lot of times when once Tamal Krishna Maharaj was asked about the Darwin theory, and Maharaj said it's a theory. It's not a fact. So theory means something that is still, being presented for, it hasn't been proven. So if it's proven, then it's a fact, but it's a theory. Finally, we get into the realm of Shabda Praman, which is what the Vedas are actually teaching us. Shabda Praman is word of authority. So this, again, we may rebel against it, but there is, in our day-to-day life, we do accept authority. Right? For example, if I take out my car on the street, and instead of turning left or to go on to M1, if I just turn right, there'll be a car that will be coming in the opposite direction, which will likely hit me. Or if I go above the speed limit, or for example, if I even violate the laws that are actually being ordained by the state, I'll be fined. Or there's an innate call of duty within me to actually adhere to those laws. So there's always, we always are following authority, whether we accept it or not. Um, in fact, once I remember a person, I think at my work, telling me that when the discussion was that does God exist or not? And this person said, I was in India. He was actually not an Indian. He said, I was in India and I realized that God must exist. He said, how? How did you know that? He said, because I was standing at a traffic light which wasn't working and there were cars going around and there was no collision. So I must admit that there is God who exists because there was somehow the other, a system which was being followed and God was protecting them. Or else how in the world without a traffic light functioning, without a person there, directing the traffic to go in whatever direction, there has to be a God that actually exists. So there's always authority. Now, for us to, when we see that in our regular day-to-day affairs, why don't we extend that to even the spiritual aspect of things? So the Vedas actually, like in the Vedas or in Srila Prabhupada's purpose in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the living entity is spiritual. Now what classifies something as spiritual? Satchidananda Vigraha, Sat, eternal, eternality, Chit, full of knowledge. And third is Ananda. So as a jiva, as a living entity, we have this desire to live eternally, don't we? Once Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk, and a disciple was playing. They were having a conversation, and Srila Prabhupada's, they would put forward certain, philosophers or the views of certain philosophers, and then Prabhupada would counter-argue, and then that way they would have a conversation. Prabhupada presents certain points, and in one instance, Srila Prabhupada said, I don't mind taking birth as a dog. And Prabhupada said, why don't you take your birth as a dog right now? And the person said, I'm attached to my body, I don't want to die. I won't take the body of a dog, but for me to take the body of a dog means I have to vanquish this body, even though this body will be full of suffering. So even a lot of times when we see in the hospital, when you go and ask someone, even there who are at the deathbed, they have the desire to prolong their life for a little bit. And that's coming from the fact that we are all eternal. Full of knowledge. Now this too, if we see, we are always hankering, or we are always looking for means to acquire knowledge, whether that may be knowledge to perform our work, to whether that may be to raise our family, to acquire, or for doing anything, for cooking or for anything that we do, we always are seeking knowledge. So that thirst for knowledge is always there in us. And secondly and lastly, Ananda. We are always pleasure-seeking entities. No one walks out of the door of the house in the morning wanting to embrace some calamity or something bad. We're always wanting to embrace positivity, to be for the day to be as filled with as much of happiness and positive vibrations. But somehow or the other, whenever anything that's disturbing to us, when it confronts us, we become morose. So like that, Vedas are saying that we are Satchidananda. That means eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And we are seeking that. So the Vedas state of Shabda Praman, which is, we hear from an authority that is free from these four defects. That is tendency to cheat, doesn't have imperfect senses, not to be illusioned, and not committing mistakes. So the Vedas are actually coming from that source. If we refer to the 12th canto, actually in the 12th canto there's a reference of how the Vedas came into existence. If we all just go to 12th canto, chapter 6, this is the chapter in which Maharaj Parikshit is finally being bit by the Takshaka bird. And if we all go to verse number 40 to 41, or actually text 37, this is after Parikshit Maharaj has been bit by has been affected by the curse of the Brahmana, and his son Janmajaya is actually very, very. He wants to seek revenge for what's happened, and he takes a vow to actually burn all the snakes of this world. So he arranges for a sacrifice in which he's calling for Takshaka and the other snakes to actually fall into this fire. And at that very moment, Brigu, let me see, who's this? Brihaspati approaches Janmajaya and advises him to stop the sacrifice. And after that's all done, then they speak on how these different, how do the Vedas come into existence. And in text 37, Sutta Goswami said, "O Brahmana, first a subtle vibration of transcendental sound appeared from the sky of the heart of the most elevated Lord Brahma, whose mind was perfectly fixed in spiritual realization. One can perceive this subtle vibration when one stops all external hearing." Because Srimad Bhagavatam is the supreme Vedic literature, the sages headed by Shaunaka decided to trace out its source. And then we see in text 40 to 41, and it carries on to the rest of the chapter. This Omkara, the sound that was actually vibrated by the heart of Lord Brahma, this Omkara, ultimately non-material and imperceptible, is heard by the super soul without his possessing material ears or any other material senses. The entire expanse of the Vedic sound is elaborated from Omkara, which appears from the soul within the sky of the heart. It is the direct designation of the self-originating absolute truth, the super soul, and is the secret essence and eternal seed of all Vedic hymns. All-powerful Brahma made use of this collection of sounds to produce from his four faces the four Vedas, which appeared together with the sacred Omkara and the 7 Vyariti invocations. His intention was to propagate the process of Vedic sacrifice according to the different functions performed by the priests of each of the 4 Vedas. Brahma taught these Vedas to his sons, who were great sages amongst the Brahmanas and experts in the art of Vedic recitation. They in turn took the role of acharyas and imparted the Vedas to their own sons. In this way, throughout the cycle of 4 ages, generation after generation of disciples, all firmly fixed in their spiritual vows, have received these Vedas by disciplic succession. At the end of each Dwapara Yuga, the Vedas are edited into separate divisions by eminent sages. So, each of these Vedas are actually given to each of the acharyas. That are actually being described in that chapter, and also it's described further in the first canto. So, like I said, Vedas are eternal. It's not a religious belief. In fact, if we read the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, where Krishna says to Arjuna, "Just by hearing from me in full consciousness of me, you can know me in truthful from doubt." Krishna doesn't say, "Believe in me, Arjuna." He just says, "Just hear. Tat Shrinu, just hear from me." So, as we understand, this knowledge gets revealed through the process of hearing, and that hearing is actually passed down through the parampara or disciplic succession. And actually that's what a lot of times we say we don't have faith in the Vedas or the faith in the process. Prabhupada writes in the 9th chapter of the Gita, where faith is created in the association of devotees. So in the association of devotees, what does one talk about? What does one discuss? What does one aspire for? Is the service or the glories of Shri Radha Gopinath and our Shri Gauranga Jagannath, Baldev and Subhadra, and how one should actually perfect one's life by performing this sacrifice, which Krishna talks about to Arjuna in the third chapter. And in fact, it is said towards the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, the acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be given up because they purify even the greatest soul. So that's this chapter, in which the context that Daksha curses Lord Shiva, we see cursing and counter-cursing happening, and now was just where Bhrigu Muni is actually cursing the followers of Lord Shiva, and we'll see Shiva, because he's so morose, he feels sorry for what's just happened, he just walks away. So a lot of times, when there's what we are seeing here, if we just see it on the external, from the external viewpoint, we will actually feel that there is some sort of, that there is, things are not fair. But when we see the spiritual aspect of things, then we'll be able to see things in proper perspective. So again, the Vedas are aparashaya. They are actually coming from a spiritual source. From time and time again, Krishna says in the Gita, the knowledge that was spoken has been lost, and now I've come to restore it. So similarly, even with Vedic teachings, we see that, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates left, Gaudiya Vaishnavism was, it seemed to have had struggles, and it was revived by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. And certainly from time to time, acharyas come and inject the spiritual essence, just to revive that which has been lost. So certainly from time to time, our duty is, even in our own life, our spiritual practice may go through its ups and downs, but we have the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, the acharyas, the Bhagavatam, the association devotees to always keep us enthused. So I'll end here. I think I've gone maybe 5 minutes over time. If maybe someone has a question or a comment, we can pause for that. Yes, Hare Krishna. Even before they were cursed? Okay, yes, you're saying Bhrigu Muni said, it is not due to my cursing that you shall become atheist. You're already situated in the principle of atheism, therefore you are condemned. Well, he's saying this on the fact because they blaspheme Lord Shiva. Sorry, because they supported Daksha. No, wait a minute. No, sorry, yeah. He's saying that because Bhrigu Muni is on the side of Daksha. Yes. Bhrigu reaction for Brahmanical curse. Yeah. Why is it that followers of Lord Shiva are actually against the Vedas? See, we have to see the followers of Lord Shiva. For example, Shiva has a Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya. So who are the true followers? Because the Rudra Sampradaya is actually one of the bona fide Sampradayas of, who are actually propagating, the Vedic teachings. So are we referring to those, or are we referring to those who are actually engaged in all sorts of abominable activities, who are just, as in one of the earlier verses, I think text 29, it speaks of those who actually perform all kind of illicit activities and claim to be the followers of Shiva. So who are they referring to? So it's those that are actually performing all kinds of abominable activities and consuming ganja and because they are somehow or the other not understanding what's the true mood of Lord Shiva. As we see here, Shiva, even though the followers of Shiva get offended, Shiva doesn't get offended. Shiva just walks away. He's indifferent to it. But then the followers have actually taken offense, and those are the ones who are actually cursing him. So, so with Shiva, with Lord Shiva, his personality is such that he's again, and we see in the later, as I said, he tells in a conversation with Parvati, Mother Parvati, he says, "I'm going to come and I'm going to preach atheism with a view of driving away the Buddhists," because at that time, because Buddha actually was preaching against. He was advocating that one should not follow the Veda if one is, because the priests were actually saying we'll follow the Vedas. We're performing the sacrifice in the name of the Vedas. So he actually was discrediting the Vedas, and just to establish the authority of the Vedas, Lord Shiva appeared as Sankaracharya to come and give them. So again, if we just look at that one incident or that one passing in the bigger scheme of things, it becomes a bit hard for us to understand. But when we see the entire expanse of what's actually happening, then it helps us. So, so the followers of Lord Shiva, the Rudra Sampradaya, they're actually following and giving his, and actually representing him in the way that he wants, in his mood of worship too. Because as we understand, Lord Shiva is worshipping Sankarshan in the spiritual world. So why is that so, and where is this contamination coming from? We understand this is the effects of Kali Yuga and how this comes about. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Namo Shubhadaya Krishna.